Chris Bowen just got absolutely eviscerated on live television, and the part that should terrify you is not what Peta Credlin said, it is what Bowen could not deny. Because while Australia's climate change minister is out there positioning himself as the world's chief climate negotiator for COP31, promising to lobby Saudi Arabia and petrostates to abandon fossil fuels, he is simultaneously overseeing an economy that is more dependent on coal and gas exports than it has ever been. And when Credlin laid out the numbers, the timeline and the sheer hypocrisy of Australia lecturing oil kingdoms while raking in record fossil fuel revenue, Bowen did not have an answer. He had talking points, he had deflection, but he did not have an answer. And that silence tells you everything you need to know about where Australia's energy policy is actually heading versus where the government pretends it is heading. If you are sick of watching politicians say one thing internationally and do the complete opposite domestically, if you want to understand how Australia's energy transition is being sold as climate leadership while locking in decades more fossil fuel dependency, then subscribe and turn on notifications, because this channel exists to follow the money, call out the contradictions, and explain what energy policy actually means for your power bills, your cost of living, and your economic future. No political loyalty, no ideological spin, just independent analysis that refuses to pretend the emperor is wearing clothes when he clearly is not. Here is what Credlin exposed. Chris Bowen is Australia's lead negotiator for COP31, that is the United Nations Climate Summit happening in Turkey. His stated mission is to pressure Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and other petrostates to stop blocking progress on phasing out fossil fuels. He has been on the record saying Australia will take a hard-nosed approach with big emitters. He wants to position Australia as a climate leader, a country that is serious about the energy transition, a nation that is walking the walk, not just talking the talk. And then Credlin hit him with the actual data. Australia's coal exports are at record highs. Gas exports are surging. The federal government has approved new coal mines, new gas fields, and the revenue flowing into Treasury from fossil fuel royalties and taxes is bankrolling the budget. So how exactly does Chris Bowen plan to tell Saudi Arabia to abandon oil while Australia is expanding coal? This is where the pressure really starts, because Bowen's answer on live television was not a defence of the policy, it was a defence of the contradiction. He argued that Australia can be a major fossil fuel exporter and a climate leader at the same time, that we can sell coal and gas to the world while transitioning domestically to renewables, that there is no hypocrisy in lobbying petrostates to phase out oil while we are digging up more coal than ever before. And if you think that argument holds water, then you have not been paying attention to how international climate negotiations actually work, because the moment Australia walks into a room and tells Saudi Arabia to cut fossil fuels, the Saudis are going to pull up Australia's export data and laugh us out of the building, and they'll be right to do it. Let us be very clear about what is happening here. Australia is not transitioning away from fossil fuels. We are transitioning towards being a renewable energy superpower while simultaneously expanding fossil fuel exports. That is the official policy. Export coal and gas to fund the renewable transition at home. It is having your cake, eating it, and then lecturing everyone else about their diet. And it might be politically clever in Canberra, but it is economically incoherent and diplomatically catastrophic, because you cannot be the world's climate leader while you are also one of the world's biggest fossil fuel exporters. Those two positions are fundamentally incompatible, and every country at COP31 knows it. But here is the part most people are not being told. The reason Bowen is in this impossible position is not because he personally loves coal. It is because Australia's economy is structurally dependent on fossil fuel revenue, and no one in government has been willing to admit that dependency out loud. Coal and gas exports generate over $100 billion in export income every year. That money flows into wages, taxes, royalties, and corporate profits. It funds schools, hospitals, and infrastructure. And if you cut it off tomorrow, the Australian economy collapses. So the government has decided that the politically safe play is to promise a renewable future while extending the fossil fuel present for as long as possible. And that strategy works domestically, where voters are told we are leading on climate, but it falls apart internationally, where other countries can see exactly what we are doing. And this is where the Peta Credlin moment becomes so devastating, because she did not just call out the hypocrisy, she called out the timeline. Bowen is planning to lobby Saudi Arabia in the lead-up to COP31. That summit is happening soon, but in the months leading up to it, Australia will approve more coal projects, sign off on more gas exports, and collect more fossil fuel royalties. So when Bowen sits down with the Saudis and tells them to phase out oil, they are going to ask him one very simple question. When is Australia phasing out coal? And the answer is, we are not. We are expanding it. And that is not a secret. It is public policy. What makes this even more absurd is that Bowen genuinely believes he can pull this off. He thinks that Australia's domestic renewable energy rollout gives us credibility on the world stage, that installing solar panels and wind farms at home somehow offsets the fact that we're exporting coal to be burned overseas. But climate diplomacy does not work that way, because emissions do not care about borders. If Australia digs up coal and ships it to India, and India burns it, those emissions still contribute to global warming. It does not matter that Australia's domestic grid is getting cleaner. What matters is the total carbon impact of everything we are producing and exporting. And by that measure, Australia is one of the biggest carbon exporters on the planet. We are not a climate leader, we are a climate liability. And here is the economic consequence that no one in government wants to talk about. If the world actually does transition away from fossil fuels, Australia is catastrophically exposed, because we have spent decades building an economy that depends on selling coal and gas to countries that are supposed to be phasing them out. And when that demand disappears, so does a massive chunk of our national income. The smart play would be to start diversifying now, to use fossil fuel revenue to build the industries that will replace it, to invest in green hydrogen, battery manufacturing, renewable energy exports, and critical minerals processing. But instead, we are doubling down on coal and gas, locking in decades more dependency, and hoping that the energy transition takes longer than everyone says it will. That is not a strategy, that is a gamble. And if it goes wrong, Australian workers and households will pay the price. This is also where Bowen's COP31 appointment becomes a masterclass in political theatre, because being president of negotiations sounds impressive, it sounds like leadership, but in practice it means herding cats. The COP process is a consensus-based negotiation where every country has a veto. That means Saudi Arabia, Russia, and every other petrostate can block any agreement they do not like, and they will, because they have no incentive to phase out fossil fuels when Australia, one of the supposed climate leaders, is still exporting coal exports. So Bowen's job is not to deliver a fossil fuel phase-out. His job is to manage expectations, broker weak compromises, and come home claiming progress when nothing has actually changed. And that is exactly what will happen. So when you watch Chris Bowen talk about climate leadership, when you hear him promise to take a hard-nosed approach with petrostates, when you see him positioned as the world's chief climate negotiator, remember what Peta Credlin exposed. Remember that Australia is expanding coal exports while preaching fossil fuel phase-outs. Remember that we are locking in decades more carbon dependency while claiming to lead the energy transition. And remember that the people who will pay for this contradiction are not the politicians.